Thank you, Anastasia. Now to the story that we're calling the Cuban thousands. There are more than 11,000 doctors that are working in Brazil. Most of them are missioned in the Brazilian countryside, and they work with the poor. When the president of Brazil was a lefty, they were welcomed. But now that Brazil has elected a righty, they are no longer welcomed. He makes his argument based on a free market defense of the doctors, interestingly enough, but it's pretty apparent already for anyone who's followed South American politics that there is no love lost between these two countries right now, who used to be, by the way, something you should note in case you don't, they used to be the closest of allies. These used to be best friends. Apparently not anymore. First, the background on this unique Cuban initiative that sends out its medical professionals really as if it were a national resource. Rachel Blevins explains.
While other countries have exports such as wheat, sugar, and oil, Cuba has doctors. A program that started in the 1960s has resulted in thousands of Cuban doctors providing their services in more than 100 countries. And Cuba's government has profited as a result. Recent estimates indicate that the Cuban government makes around $8 billion a year in profits from the program. Right now, the program is carried out by more than 37,000 Cuban doctors and nurses who work in 77 countries. The most well-known and controversial case occurs in Venezuela, where doctors are sent in exchange for oil. This year, Venezuela has supplied Cuba with around 49,000 barrels of oil a day. RT America sent a team to Cuba, and they spoke to a doctor on the ground who said that when it comes to the program,
our strategy is to go to poor places where there are no doctors because the country doesn't have enough doctors and nurses to make it to those places. Cuban collaborators are called to unprotected and remote places where there is an important limitation of medical personnel.
But now Cuba is removing at least one ally from its program as the country announced that it will remove more than 11,000 doctors who are currently working in Brazil. This comes after Brazil's newly elected leader criticized the Cuban government for taking a large portion of the doctors' salaries. In response to the news, Brazil's president-elect compared the program to slave labor and questioned whether the Cuban doctors are receiving proper treatment.
It is a disrespect to those who receive treatment by these Cubans. We have no proof that they are in fact doctors and are fit for that job.
By ending the program in Brazil, Cuba is sacrificing hundreds of millions of dollars in profits, and it has raised concerns that this could be just the beginning of a conflict between Cuba's communist government and Brazil's newly elected far-right leader. In Washington, Rachel Blevins, RT.
Joining us now is Olávio Rossê Armesto. He is the Vice President of the National Cuban Journalists Association, and we're so happy to have him here. Olávio, how are you doing tonight?
Very good, very well, thank you.
So here's what is your beef with Bolsonaro? And, or I should say, what is your beef with the doctors that Bolsonaro is trying to essentially kick out of his country?
Well, I think our primary beef should be with organizations like the United Nations and the Organization of American States, OAS, and even with the U.S. government that has never brought an uproar as to these people being used as human trafficking, because that's what it really essentially is. It's human trafficking. You know, these people are slaves, practically speaking. If they escape, they don't have papers. Their family is kept as hostage in the Castro-controlled island, and they are paid meager sums for their services, if indeed they are doctors, because we have to take the Castro regime's word that these people are trained as doctors, because they've never been examined at the countries where they're sent to. They've never been licensed there. Yeah. So, you know, whose word are we going to take?
Listen, I get your point. I get your point, and I think it's a good one. I think it's an important point that you're making. But, you know, in the end, there's a couple of things that we have to clarify. First of all, Most of these people who are being trained as doctors in Cuba are very good doctors. You and I have seen them in Miami when they're finally able to get out of Cuba, and they come to Miami. They're very qualified, very dedicated, and they do great work. So I hope you're not dismissing the doctors, the professionals themselves, which I don't think you are, right?
No, but again, this is all, the qualifications of the doctors that we have in Miami would be anecdotal. It is not statistical. It is not proven with paperwork. Now, the doctors, obviously, that come to the U.S. have to take extensive courses and examinations in order to be licensed to work as doctors in the United States. But that's not the case with the personnel that is sent to Venezuela, Bolivia.
But let's suppose, okay, and I understand, but let us suppose they're not the greatest doctors in the world. Maybe they don't have the greatest qualifications. We're talking about countries where in the remotest parts of that country, they haven't seen a health professional in a long, long time, period. The fact that they're seeing somebody, right, whether it's a nurse or a doctor or someone maybe not as qualified as the people that you and I go to see, shouldn't that be something, just from a humanistic standpoint, that we should be grateful for?
No, I think that we should never be grateful when human beings are trafficked as resources, as trafficked as slaves. Right. I mean, these are people that are not free. They are not free to make those decisions. They are not free to select where they will serve, what country they will travel to, or even, they're not even free to decide how long they're going to be in those countries.
But here's
all of those decisions are made for them.
And we're running out of time, so I get your point, but let me argue it from this point of view. Let's suppose, so you're arguing Bolsonaro's point, that he doesn't think these doctors are being treated well. Shouldn't he be arguing from the standpoint of his citizens? Because I get what you're saying. And by the way, I agree with you. I agree with you that these doctors probably are not treated very well. But Bolsonaro is arguing against the doctors. Shouldn't he be saying, but I'm grateful they're here and they're helping my citizens?
There is also a lot of anecdotal evidence about malpractice cases that these doctors are engaged in these countries. And the citizens of those countries, the residents, have no protection because of the fact that these so-called doctors are given carte blanche. They are given full powers to prescribe medications, to operate, to do surgeries, and a lot of times they may not be the best trained, and they injure and they harm the population there, and those people have no way to protect themselves in those cases of malpractice.
You sound like you're making them out to be monsters. Okay. Olávio Rossê Armesto, I thank you for your comments, spirited debate. Come on back. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.